9?
You just made it.
Listen, I didn't get any
we're
beer.
Live.
Right?
You always
Told you.
distract me. You
What
didn't
did I
get any
say?
beer. Alf has
Hey, I had
beer.
faith in you, dog.
Look, you got to come to Broward, man. Like, if you want beer, you got to come to Broward. Alex Toledo under me wearing the Black Lives Matter shirt. I'm wearing Bucket Brothers when Tyler used to look like this, kind of. What are you wearing, Leif?
Leif is frozen in time.
Oh, he's frozen in time. He's going back. All right, Alf. Alf's wearing the 5 on the floor shirt. Leif will be back in a second.
Actually, this is the Dwayne Wade back of the head shirt right now.
Yeah, I want to discuss that before we get to today's Floor is Yours. Why did Dwayne decide to turn his hair into our logo?
He's a big fan.
It looks like it, doesn't it? It looks exactly like it.
Striking resemblance.
It is. I don't know. It just got stuck in his head, something like that, and then it got stuck on his head. Anyway,
you gonna send him some invoices?
There's a lot of invoices I should send Dwayne. A lot of them through the years.
Wow.
A lot of them. So anyway, I want to introduce this with Greg Sylvander under me, Leif. Big announcement this week is that he's going to be doing some more stuff for us. So here, 5 on the Floor website, Guts Check, etc. So he will be more present for you. He's our what do you call yourself? What presence? The something presence?
Oh, an aware presence. Sorry, okay. Just that sometimes the spiritual stuff, the meditation stuff bleeds into the heat stuff.
That's fine. Well, so you're now our aware presence over here. Also, all right, we've got 5 topics today. We want to take your questions. I forgot to tweet out the link, so Manny, if you want to go ahead and do that, go ahead and do that. We are taking questions. We've got Manny Chang doing the producing behind the scenes, as always, on this program. Thank you, Manny. Let's get to topic number 1. The Miami Heat went to the bubble yesterday around 4:30. They headed up there. There were 2 players not on the bus. I'm still not naming them, although I can say this. If Heat fans can't figure it out by now, I can't help you. Is
it Myers?
I mean, right, it's in Myers. I mean, Heat fans are sitting there like playing, is it this one? They're like eliminating them off the list. And I'm like, this isn't that hard to figure out. They got stuck on the reporters, I think, to try to throw out some deception, calling the players rotation players. I'm just going to leave it at that, okay? Anybody who plays is a rotation player. It does not mean you cannot be a starter. It just means you're a rotation player. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. There are 2 players that are not there. As I reported yesterday, I am very confident that everybody's going to be ready to go by the time the games start. So I'm confident. I'm not a doctor, but from what I've heard, I'm not, believe it or not. But from what I've heard about, I went to Johns Hopkins, but I did the easy thing. I didn't go to med school. What I have heard is that they're going to be okay, and so it's just a question of testing negative, and then they can join the team. As we reported, Derek Jones Jr. is with the teams, so he's already cleared. So we basically got everybody but 2 players there. But let's get to this. This is a topic we really haven't covered that much on the podcast side, which is the Heat have 8 games starting on August 1st through August 14th. They play basically 7 teams that are going to make 7 games against teams that are going to make the playoffs, and then Phoenix. Eric Spoelstra says they're going to play these like they would play them to win. But I'll go to you first on this, Alf. Should they be going like full speed ahead on those games, or should they be using those 8 games to kind of figure out a rotation and see where they're at, considering there does not seem to be, unless you're going to catch Boston to 3, there doesn't seem to be a lot of incentive to win, really, in the last 8.
No, I think there's a huge incentive to win, but I also think there's an incentive to keep everybody healthy, right? So, yes, you go full throttle, but you go deep into the bench. Like, you use 11, 12 guys if you have to. That's the way I would do it. And I think they need to go full throttle, because if you get that 3 seed, it's almost like a first-round bye at this point, because nobody else after 6 is even trying. After 5, in the East is even trying to win. You get the Pacers without Oladipo. You get the Wizards without Beal and Bertans. You get Orlando, it's Orlando. There's nobody trying after Philly. So I think
Beasley in Brooklyn.
You get Brooklyn without Kyrie, Durant, probably Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie had symptoms a week ago. And you have Beasley as their number 1 option. So
scary.
I think
scary.
Scary.
Starting in game 6, though, Alf, he can't even play in the first 5 games. How appropriate is it that Michael Beasley is going to a bubble and he's still suspended? He's still suspended. He's got 5 games before he can even get back out there.
And they're not testing, right? They're not testing for marijuana.
Not once inside. I mean, dude, he's
hot boxing the shit out of that room.
Oh,
he's going to be the only
get
one.
the good shit in there.
Like some Red Man and Method Man type stuff. Yeah.
He's going to be the only one eating that food. Like he's like, oh my God, this is delicious. What are you guys talking about? But yeah, that 3 seed is important, man. And I think it's within reach because I don't care how hard the Heat schedule is. I mean, that's based off a regular season record, a regular season that's now basically defunct. Mm-hmm. I think they have a chance at that 3 seed, and they should go for it.
What do you think, Alex?
I mean, honestly, I'm with Alf all the way. I think they should be going deep into the rotation. I don't think, these seeding games is the perfect time for them to really figure out what are the combinations that are working right now because they basically had the same time off as, a regular off season. So I think now would be the time it would make sense to run 11, 12 guys because they've got that many guys that kind of deserve that run. And I think it's also good to conserve, the guys that you really want to play once you eventually do short it down to 9 or whatever Spo decides to do. And I think the seeding matters. Like you said, the 3 seed would be the goal. Other than that, if the 3 seed for some reason becomes almost unattainable by the first 3 games, let's say they get off to a bad start, the Celtics won a couple, then maybe we could talk about the seeding not mattering much. But yeah, I think they should do 11 or 12 for sure.
Well, Leif, though, what's the end result here if the Heat do stumble out of the gate, and say they go 3-5, 2-6 going into the playoffs? I mean, do you think it carries over in any way?
I mean, I think it's kind of impossible to predict because it's such a unique scenario. But ultimately, I think at the end of this season, in these last 8 games that it is, Spo has to do both. You have to go for it, but you also have to be conservative in certain ways. And what I mean by that is that you kind of have to find your 5 guys that you trust, like the 5 or maybe 6 guys that you really, really, really trust, and you hone in on that. And then you use the rest of the time to find those pieces in the periphery that you're going to supplement those guys with when you go into the playoff atmosphere. So I feel like you kind of have to pay attention to both of those elements, and that's what makes this particularly tricky. If they stumble, I'm not really that worried because you can just shorten the rotation even more when you get into the playoffs, and then you're playing your 5 best guys anyway. So I wouldn't put too much stock in any of this. These guys are going to be rusty.
Right. Well, I think one of the things they're going to have to we saw that with the MLS match last night, although I don't know what I'm watching, but it didn't look real good. I think one of the things he's got to navigate too, though, is if you don't play enough guys and let's say the bubble atmosphere is just not fun, there's going to be a lot of guys there, if they're not playing, are going to be like, why the hell am I here? And so, I mean, other than the paycheck, obviously, and some of these guys are in the last year of their deal, but I do think it gets a little bit challenging. By the way, Alf has departed us for a second, but one question before we get to topic 2, which is, what's your feeling about NBA players bitching about the conditions? Like Rajon Rondo put up a photo of it and said basically it was a motel. I've stayed at Motel 6s. That basically looks like a Renaissance hotel. I mean, is it right? It's fine. Like what's your view on that?
That's so bad. That's a damn nice hotel room, right? It's not. It doesn't seem ginormous, right? Which maybe it's what this is what these guys are used to, right? Rondo's been in the league since 2006, right? This guy is so far away from regular people at this point. So it's still hilarious though, because it's a damn nice hotel room. Like, did you see the marble there? Like everything there is like exquisite quality. Like I'm sure that bathroom is just beautiful.
Right. It's all relative though with these guys, and I think that like that's if you're gonna have some fun with it and do it in a lighthearted way. I think that's all good. But like if you're gonna legit start to act as if you're being mistreated, I think that's a little extreme considering your compensation and the fact that you do get to live a pretty healthy lifestyle for the most part. So I don't know. I feel like it's kind of we blow it up a little bit.
Well, LeBron made it seem like he was going to prison. He said he's going to do a bid. It's basically.
I mean, it's got to be weird.
I felt like
right?
that was meant more about him leaving his family, saying goodbye and doing that whole deal.
I get it, but people are sensitive about the language that guys are using right now. Considering how many people are out of work. Let's just start there. I mean, so I think they got to be a little bit more careful. The Myers Leonard approach, where he goes up there and he sets up his streams and says this is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I mean, to me, I think that endears you to fans. The Rajon Rondo stuff does not.
I mean, look, if you're a gamer, this is nothing. This is nothing.
Oh no. If you're a gamer,
however, though, on the other side of the coin, if you're not a video game type guy,
that's Jimmy and UD.
Good luck to them. Oh
yeah, I mean, there's nothing to do. I mean, really, right? I mean, they don't. I mean,
they can't even leave. You can't even bring. I mean, they couldn't bring somebody over if they wanted to, according to the letter of the law, of course. Right, I'm not talking about Jimmy UD specifically, but like you get me, all the options are so narrowed down that if you don't have one of these types of hobbies, oh man, it's gonna be tough.
Well, small world.
It is a small world. Well, I should probably move on from this, but Chandel told me, Chandel Richardson, who's now of SI, he told me that he got an email from a group that is providing women to the bubble, but not in person. It's basically special Zoom calls to keep these guys busy. They wanted him to write something up. He decided not to. I'll move on. Number two, Jimmy Butler. We saw him with the mask. He's in Orlando. We knew he was going to be in Orlando. We've talked a lot about him, but I feel like now, this is his moment, kind of. This may be the last time that he's the best player on the Miami Heat. Depending on what they do this offseason. Well, I saw that too. Depending on what they do this offseason, what should we expect for Jimmy? What is satisfactory in your view?
As far as his performance?
Yes.
Go ahead, Leif.
No, I mean, for me, I'm looking for Jimmy, two things: fresh legs, and improved shooting, obviously. Yep. But those are kind of like the technical things that I'm looking for. Ultimately, I feel like this is his element, his ideal kind of scenario to thrive. So, and we've talked about that at length. So it's kind of like the moment of truth, and that you get to kind of see if he's going to lead these guys. But for the most part, because he's had to facilitate so much, and then we saw for a variety of reasons him shoot not as great as maybe we expected. Those are the things I'll be looking at first, because he's so rested.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you hit on it there. I think you nailed what you said about just the circumstances, and I know you guys specifically have already heard as much, that he's been all in. He's been kind of getting the guys motivated, been working out consistently and relentlessly. So that part, I'm already kind of, it feels like it's a sure thing already, where I think he's gonna be as healthy as he's been all season. He got a whole off season off already,
right,
as far as time. So that's 100% what I expect. Maybe he's a little bit rusty with the jumper out of the gate, but I would like to see overall the jumper improves, because I think they're gonna need that in the playoffs, especially if they go against Philly, because they're huge, right, and they're gonna drop back on the Heat on specifically their non-shooters like crazy. When Jimmy Butler runs a pick and roll, they're gonna tell their guys to drop back, which means mid-range jumpers, and he's been great at that his whole career. So
just
I think
not this year. Yeah,
exactly. Right. That part needs to come back, and yeah, that's as far the legs for sure will be back, I think.
All right. Speaking of who needs to come back, I think Alf is reappearing. Let's get to topic 3. One of our viewers here brought this up. Am I the only one who, for some reason, had access to the Herald today and was able to read Barry's 3,000-word piece on Victor Oladipo?
I finally got to it as well.
Okay.
I did not.
All right. I'm not going to get into all the specifics of it, because, to be honest with you, and I greatly respect Barry's command of all this, but my eyes glazed over about 200 words in. I think the point of it was that, Victor wants to be in Miami. I think we all sort of agree on that. I mean, and Alex and I talked about that last night on the podcast side, that, look, J. Michael Falgust up in Indiana, who worked in Washington for a long time, is not a bomb thrower. He's someone who gets to know the players. And so if he's hearing these things, he's probably protecting more than he's actually giving away. So I don't think there's any surprise that Vic wants to be in Miami. That what Barry's story was about today was, could you get him and Giannis in 2021? And he started to go through all of the permutations, and it's pretty damn clear that you'd have to dump a lot of people to make that work.
Too many variables.
Right.
I mean, a lot of it could be viable. There's 100 paths to get there, but it's a little early to speculate. I feel like, at least for that to that finite level of detail.
Well, they'll give Andy 3 minutes, and he'll figure out all the details, and
he will.
and Victor will be in Miami. But I think that here's my question, okay? Without us getting into the things we know and the things we can't know. The things we know is Victor has an interest in Miami, which is what we knew about Jimmy. The things we don't know is how the cap's going to affect this, how all the other pieces move. The one question that we can speculate about is if you had a team with Bam, Jimmy, and Vic as your top 3 players, no Giannis, those 3 guys. Again, we don't know what Boston's going to look like. We don't know what Philly's going to look like. We don't know what Toronto, Milwaukee are going to look like. Giannis is still in Milwaukee, then they'll still be a factor. Is that traditionally, though, those 3 types of players enough to win the East?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you get the Oladipo, I mean, we have to, there's a caveat here. If you get the Oladipo that we saw right before he got injured, I think that he fits perfectly defensively. The things he can do, creating and freeing up Jimmy a little bit more. And then if you would, under this circumstance, you would be keeping some of those shooters even. So then it's even more of a nice fit there. And that's why I think ultimately Oladipo is such an interesting option, because if you trade for him now or this summer, you get a whole year with him and you could see if it works. If it doesn't work, what's going to happen with other guys on the team. And then you really go into 2021 with even more leverage. So that's why I feel like they're going to look at this sooner rather than later.
How good is the fit, Alex, between Vic, Jimmy, and Bam?
Honestly, I think that's something that's going to be dependent on, like, let's say he does become available via trade and the Heat end up deciding that they want to go that route rather than wait for the 2021 offseason to go after him without trading. Man, that team, I think it's going to be dependent on if they have to give up the shooters. If they have to give up Hero and Duncan Robinson, it's going to be really hard. And I think it's good. Well, I mean, if you guys really think a scenario with Kendrick Nunn and a pick is as the headliner is possible, then I mean, it would be hard to not be all in on that, honestly. But it just doesn't seem possible.
I don't think it would be. Well, again, first thing, he has to force his way out. I mean, that's part of it.
Exactly, right. It's got to be that type of situation.
We've talked about that with Jimmy, right? So I'm thinking of the 2 or 3. To me, it's Nunn and Hero or Robinson. It's not Nunn and it's not Hero and Robinson. I think, and then the question becomes: is that worth it? And it depends what you think Kendrick's upside is. I keep coming back to this with Kendrick, though, and it's no disrespect to Kendrick. I believe he's going to be one of the real surprises of this Orlando situation. Ultimately, I don't want to say more than that. I think ultimately he will be, but I just think that if you look at it, to me, a lot of it is what the asset cost was, right? And from the Heat's perspective, the asset cost on Tyler Hero was a first-round pick. And I know they don't value those like other teams. It was a first-round pick. The asset cost on Kendrick Nunn was a claim. On
Rodney Magruder.
On Duncan, right, on Rodney Magruder, which actually served another purpose for you because it got you under the cap. And I've told, or under the tax, and I've told this story before. When they made the Kendrick Nunn move, and I can tell this, Jimmy Butler's agent went to him and said, they're coming to get you. Because it was just like when David Griffin picked up all those non-guaranteed contracts. They thought that Kendrick Nunn was going to be thrown into a deal to kind of make the numbers work. I think that the Heat then saw they had a little bit more there and decided to keep him. But basically, that's the situation there. So I think it could be.
And now Magruder might win a title over there.
Absolutely, he might. Well, yeah, right. So they're losing players. So
might end up
with a big role. He might end up with a big role, and that'll please Alf. By the way, Alf's internet. His text to us was my internet effing sucks. That's
this recurring bit where he keeps leaving and coming back. It's pretty funny.
We never know if he's going to dive into a conversation because he could jump in midstream.
Right. You just don't know. He's like the Michael Beasley. Like all of a sudden the offense is going to run through him.
I would like if there was like no box. If there was no box on the screen and it was just like his voice coming in to interrupt us.
No, I want the text. It just said it's moving so slow! Exclamation point. All right, let's
before we leave Depot, let me just say one thing about losing Hero. I feel like Riley may be willing to offer up more draft picks in that scenario to try to keep some of those guys. So just don't discount that as well as an option.
Well, think about it. When you hit on draft picks, you don't want to have to try to hit again. So it's better to give up the future draft pick that you don't know what it's going to be, as opposed to, okay, we went above our pay grade on Tyler Hero, and so that makes sense. I don't think they would have to give it all up if Vic asks out. I think that's the position, and Indiana's money problems are serious. Not that Mickey doesn't have money problems, but Carnival was back down under 15 today, so it started to go the other direction.
If Oladipo were to eliminate the Pacers leverage by basically saying he would only want to go play for the Heat, I think that's basically the best scenario to make it happen at this point, because really it doesn't seem like the Pacers would have any leverage, since Oladipo just wasn't the same guy that he was in
Right.
the 2017-2018 season. He was all right the year after, and he was rusty this season, but I think because of these circumstances, it becomes a lot tighter for them to try to ask for more. So you guys may have a point there. That makes it a lot more interesting to me, by the way, because I think that was the line for me pretty much, is having to trade Hero or Duncan. And
right.
That makes it way more interesting.
Well, I think they may have to trade one, but I don't think they'll have to trade both. And I think if you look at the precedent here, once the player declares they want out, you lose all leverage unless you're Sam Presti, in which case then you
gain.
Then somehow you end up with 25 first-round picks
and a 5 seed,
a 5 seed, and a future All NBA guard out of it, which is pretty remarkable. All right, let's get to number 4. We're going to do a little bit of reminiscing here on the pod, on Floor's Yours. We'll keep taking your questions here, but there's been a lot of LeBron talk over the past few days. We talked about some anniversaries. We got into the decision, but there was another decision that was July 11th, 2014. So we're 2 days away from that, and that was the decision for LeBron to leave and basically, pen a letter in Sports Illustrated and go back to Cleveland. I don't really care about the LeBron perspective on this. I want to look at it from the Heat perspective. Do you think, Leif, if he had stayed, if he had committed to staying, and look, the cupboard was pretty bare with developmental guys at that point. They burned through, the Beasleys and the Odins. It didn't work out. The Tony Douglases. We talk about Gasol. I had a conversation with Powell about this. We talk about, Deng and Gasol and Lowry and so there's. Could they have built a champion around him over those next 2 years with Dwayne hobbling if he'd stayed?
I mean, Cleveland did, so I'm definitely betting on. And I know that obviously they had some younger legs and things like that, but I think ultimately, and unfortunately, it may have not necessarily been so popular what may have transpired had LeBron stayed. I think Chris Bosh may have been gone in that scenario. I have a gut feeling that that would have been something that they would have looked at down the line if they were looking to kind of revamp the roster or retool, because trading Dwayne in that scenario, separating Dwayne and LeBron, that was only going to be done on their terms. You were not separating them in any other scenario. So I think that's kind of what that would have looked like. And I think you could have gotten something for Chris Bosh, and LeBron, proved in Cleveland that he could get there basically no matter who he was playing with, and he continues to do that. So yes, they would have been. That was a 10-year team, just like Riley said. There was no doubt about it.
Hold on. Okay, we can't just skim over this. I'm a big Heat nerd. I have been. I feel like that's not something that I've heard before. So both of you guys have heard that in the summer of 2014, if LeBron would have made the decision to stay, their move was to let Bosh.
No. It wasn't their move.
Or to eventually dangle him.
I think to dangle him to try to repopulate the roster, and some of it depended on if Gasol was coming. And look, I had a conversation with Powell in Ohio the next year. We were in Columbus for a preseason game after LeBron went back. LeBron against Rose. The Bulls were there, and Gasol was there. And there was all this talk, because I know Dan pushed a lot of it out there, that Gasol was coming, and LeBron told him not to come. That's not what Powell told me. And I didn't even identify myself as a Miami reporter until the end. And he says, "Oh, Miami, I like that place." What Powell told me was that he asked LeBron, "Are you staying?" And LeBron said, "I don't know. I don't want you to commit." It's a small difference, but I don't want you to commit and then have me go. And so that's where it was. Now, I can tell you, and we can revisit all this stuff. On July 4th, I was told by Mike Miller that LeBron was gone. And Mike was gone already, but he was. I remember because I was waiting for a sonogram for my daughter, and I texted Mike, and he's like, "What the fuck, Ethan? You don't know? He's gone." I was like, oh, "Okay." and that was basically it. And I actually signaled it on Twitter. I said, a player in the league who's close to LeBron said that there was no chance he was staying. So I don't want to revisit all that and, kind of Pat and Andy being sad in Vegas and all that. I guess the question is, could they have done it? Let me throw this one at you, and then I want to get to our fifth topic. Do you blame the Heat at all for the decay of the roster that played some role in LeBron leaving? It wasn't, obviously there were other things, the family stuff, Savannah, wanting more control for his group, all the rest of this stuff. There was a whole bunch of other things, and obviously wanting to win one in Cleveland and everything else that played into it. But do you blame the Heat at all? Because the roster decayed. I mean, that roster in San Antonio was garbage. Michael Beasley was playing heavy minutes. There was nothing left. Do you blame them at all? Are there moves they could have made?
Definitely. But I mean, it's kind of, in retrospect, it's easy to do this because they were such in a veteran laden mindset, and it was all about now and making a run at that exact moment that they kind of threw caution to the wind. But this is the part of it that kind of sticks to the gut, is that when you see them have the ability to pivot so easily and get into this developmental type team, right, that means they had it in them. So at that point, you have to kind of look inward and say, well, we could have been having a pipeline of guys that we were surrounding at low cost, that were cost controlled asset guys around LeBron, that maybe could have enticed him to stay because he saw that there was depth and young, youth around him. So because that they have it in them, that's the part of it that sticks in a negative way.
But I would say this, Alex, they didn't have it in them then. And I've had this argument with people in the Heat organization. They'll say, well, we developed Norris Cole during this on a championship team. So there were some guys. They passed on Draymond Green. Again, I've said that many, many times. Tim Hardaway told him to take him and was told he was too fat. That was basically sort of how that played out there. And if they, this isn't
Capella.
Well, they could have taken Capella, right? Well, they could have had Jimmy Butler instead of Norris Cole. I mean, that's brought up all the time too. But I mean, Jimmy went 30th, so I'm not gonna challenge that. Jimmy would have been a pretty nice compliment as a sixth man with LeBron and Dwayne. But I think that they weren't in a developmental mindset. A lot of that happened. I think part of it, Leif, is what you're talking about. And look, David Griffin told me the same thing, and Kobe Altman in Cleveland. When you have LeBron, you have to go. You can't wait for Terrell Harris or Mikel Gladness or any of these young guys to develop. You just can't. But at the same time, they also had an older coaching staff at the time. Spo didn't have his coaches. They didn't have the pipeline.
This is true.
They had, it was, and I love Ronnie and Bob McAdoo, but again, they were old heads who were there to kind of, be the sane voices in the room and keep things together.
Those are Riles' voices.
Those are Riles' voices. They didn't have Spo's voices. The Chris Quinns and some of the others who came, Jawan, some of the ones who came in later, those were more Spo voices. I don't know if they would have gotten there from a developmental perspective. They kept using the bottom end of the roster to bring in the Eric Dampiers of the world. And so there just wasn't anything there. LeBron looked around, and what was the future? I mean, you milked a year out of Rashard Lewis, and it was like, okay, what's left? And I also think, and this comes in here, Rashard Lewis did play big minutes. Thank you, Alf. Apparently his internet works well enough to do that, or at least on the phone. The one thing that was always brought up to me too was, and this came in here, was if Dwayne was healthy, none of the rest of it would have mattered. Correct. None of it would have mattered. That of all the things we talk about, the thing that frustrated LeBron the most, friendship aside, was not knowing if he was going to be playing with Tony Douglas or Dwayne Wade until 15 minutes before the game. And that's basically
where it sucks, because Dwayne eventually turned the corner on that. So that's makes it hurt even more that LeBron didn't stick around,
I always want to ask Alf one question and then just end this episode. I'm not going to do that. Let's get to number 5. You know what? I'll try. I don't know if Alf can answer this. So I'll start with you, Alex. This is a lot of retrospection on the Heatles this week. By the way, that was mine, by the way, right? That was in a column. LeBron started using it the next day.
Right.
The term Heatles.
Humble brag.
Oh, really?
I didn't get anything out of it. LeBron went with it the next day, and it was gone. It was like I had no claim to it.
Well, listen, LeBron, I think if I remember correctly, he filed a trademark for the word taco. I mean, the phrase Taco Tuesday. I think he could have done a Heatles trademark then. use it on him.
I could have done it that night. But here's the question, and let's make these answers shorter. Alex, the Heat go to the finals 4 times in LeBron's 4 years. They win 2 championships. Did they meet expectations, exceed expectations? Alpha's gone again, or fall short of expectations?
I think, given the circumstances that we all know, which is what we just talked about right now, what you guys were referring to, Dwayne Wade's knees, just like Zach Lowe said, I don't really see anything wrong with what he said. I think he was kind of going through, trying to straddle a line, basically, of having that conversation. And at the end of the day, at the end of the article, he called it a success. And I can't help but agree. You lay out the circumstances where Dwayne Wade, when LeBron signed with the Heat, was easily a top 5 player in the NBA, was still in the middle of his athletic prime, did not show any type of sign of decline. And, by the 3rd season, by 12-13, which was, by the way, their best season as a team regardless, which makes it even more impressive, he just wasn't the same. And I think what ended up starting to go was that consistency of, a Wade games. I think you were getting a lot more games where he didn't look 100%. You got him in the playoffs versus the Pacers that year, and we got him next year severely in the finals. And I think those circumstances just make a huge difference. It completely dents their ceiling if Wade isn't completely Wade. They went to 4 straight finals despite it. They went to that first one almost without Bosh until he came back. What was it, Game 5, Game 6 versus the Celtics in the conference finals?
Game 5 against the Celtics. Well, Manny's got the Kings thing. You should have my Palm Beach Post cover because I wrote that one. Don't go with the Herald one, Manny. So, I'm with you, but I guess, like, to me, the context here, and we'll close. The context here is what the expectations of the outside world were, and what reasonable expectations are for an NBA team dealing with that kind of pressure. Because I feel like what happened to the Heat was they got set, and we talked to Mark Jones about this in the pod. I really recommend people listen to pod. It's a great pod that Alf and I did with him this morning on a lot of different subjects. But one of the things that he touched on was the expectation. Everybody didn't like Miami. They didn't want him coming to Miami. They didn't think Miami was deserving of it. And so I almost believe the expectations were set so high from the outside, whether it was Jeff Van Gundy putting the 72 on their back from the very beginning or all that it was like there was no way they could live up to expectations. And then everything was done over 4 years to make sure that they didn't. So, I mean, I'm not going to hear the not 1, not 2, not 3. It was an offhand comment at a celebration that wasn't planned on being a celebration. At least Alf's enjoying the Biscayne Bay Brewing. I'm surprised you haven't finished it yet. I mean, this is the one. Fact is, no other team
this is my second one.
Had the same pressure.
Just rubbing it in my face. I mean,
that's true. Well, I'm here. I can here for one more day. If you want to come to Broward, I'm here. I got 6 cases here. You want one?
Just gotta drive 40 minutes for beer. I mean, I might just do it. I got
Biscayne Bay Brewing. That's our sponsor. I'm going away for the weekend, so I'm not going to use it.
It's good, Alex. It's worth the drive.
It's worth it. I like the IPA, but it's
like a tropical ale or something too.
There's a tropical ale.
I didn't like beer.
Blanket.
Yeah, it's a tropical. That's right. You should get your official beer. I mean, the only person I have here is a hamster. It's not gonna drink the beer. If you want it, you can have it. So let's go to Alf's here. I'll let you finish then. You know what, Leif? I'll let Alf finish. He hasn't got a chance to talk. The Heat going into this thing exceed expectations, meet expectations, fall short of expectations. The big 3 teams.
The big 3 teams. I think they. That's a tough one because I feel like they fell short of expectations just because of the amount of time they spent together. The expectation was a dynasty, right? 5, 6, 7 years of these guys dominating the league. Whether there were different, there was a different supporting cast around them. Those 3 guys were supposed to stay together for at least 6 years. So that's where they fell below expectations. But for the time that they were together, for 4 years, for 4 finals appearances, 2 championships, should have been 3. But we all know why it wasn't 3.
Wait, what are you talking about? The AC or LeBron? What are we doing here?
We're talking about 2011.
Correct.
Yeah.
Should have been 4 if you asked me, but
here's the thing I would say about that, Alf, that always gets taken out of the equation. If they win in 2011, are we sure they win the next year? I mean, no, but
I think so. I think that the momentum that would have carried them into that next year, I think would have been like they would have been juggernaut level. Maybe they don't go after Shane Battier, who I think was.
You think LeBron still doesn't push them? find somebody to guard fours, even if they win the title.
But Alf, here's the thing: you just said it. Shane told me on 5 on the Floor, if the Heat won a championship that year, he probably doesn't come because he said that. I mean, this is the thing. Everything leads to something else, right? I mean, we're not in a bubble here. Well, we are, but we're not. We all are. I mean, everything leads to someone else, and so Shane wouldn't have come. He told me, he says, I wasn't going to join a team that already wanted a title. I wanted to be a piece that got them over the top. So
Kendrick Perkins might have actually guarded somebody his size.
Right. We don't know. and so let's say you even get to the finals and you don't have Shane. You have a hungry young OKC team. I don't know how it plays out. I mean, so there's this assumption. I mean, LeBron also locked himself basically in a gym that summer, and after he stopped locking himself out of a room, I would assume they could have won 3 if he doesn't go in the tank, but I don't know for sure.
Well,
I mean, the one they weren't going to win was the 4th year. That we know
that was not going to happen.
Yeah.
They should have won 3. They won 2. So I would say they met expectations. If we just talk about the 4 years they played together, did they exceed? No way. Nobody could ever tell you they exceeded expectations just because they didn't. The expectations was championships, and they won 2. So I don't even know how they could have exceeded expectations.
Well, the thing is,
impossible.
No.
I think the only way you could say that is the case that I was just trying to make before was basically just kind of given the circumstances they exceeded. But you're right. From the outset, the expectation was a dynasty. That's what we expected too as fans, no doubt. We were thinking we were going to get Larry Bird, Magic Johnson type presence in the NBA for the next 10 years type. But
they had the highest
circumstances matter though. The context matters a lot to me. I think given the context, they exceeded.
They literally had the highest expectations of any team that we've ever seen in NBA history.
Wade's knees don't care about your expectations.
No. But hold on. They did. They had the most pressure. I wouldn't say they had the highest expectations, only because I think the Durant Golden State team matches.
Okay, up to that point.
Yeah, what could they? The negative expectations came from Miami with hate. That's just it was a little different than the Warriors' elevated expectations, I think.
Well, people liked watching the Warriors, and Steph was to a lot of people a more likable figure than LeBron, and that
they liked hating the Heat.
You think?
Yeah, I agree with it, Dizzy. To me, if they win the 3rd, they're considered a dynasty. I think you need 3 titles to be considered a dynasty. I think Golden State was a dynasty. I mean, the Spurs are a tough one because they won, but they never won back-to-backs. So it's like they won 5, but they were so spread out, in the core.
But they're the Patriots.
Pieces.
They only lost 1 finals, right?
They only lost 1 finals. They lost 1 finals.
Never won back-to-back. Honestly, right? Somebody needs to write a column about the Spurs. They've never won back-to-back. Disappointment.
Yeah.
Disappointment.
This one I like this comment. Haslam Miller being injured doesn't get enough consideration. Nobody talks about that UD.
Those were the main guys, the main additions.
Mike was not really ever himself in Miami, and UD. I mean, they lost. He went out in the Memphis game, and they lost that game. I remember on the Rudy Gay shot. He went out in the Memphis game and he didn't play for months, and then he came back. Remember, he was rusty against Boston, and then he had that 8 minutes, like my favorite ever UD minutes. In Chicago, where he was just a terror.
What about the Indiana? The Indiana game? What was he? 6 for 6?
No, he was 8 of
8
9.
of 9.
8 of 9 in 2 games in that series. But I think people forget how important he was supposed to be to that team. I mean, he and Mike were really it was garbage on the rest of that team. I mean, it was supposed to be Mike and UD.
They were the 2 hand-picked guys by the big 3.
But didn't he start most of the 27-game win streak?
He started all of it. Their starting lineup, it's the most consistent Spurs ever gotten with a rotation. Their starting lineup it was every game was Haslam, Bosh, LeBron, Dwayne, and Rio with Cole. Cole, Battier, Allen, and Anderson off the bench. Mike didn't play. The only 2 games Mike played were the 2 he started for Dwayne during the 27-game win streak. That's the most consistent they ever got to start on. JJ never played. Unless they'd blown people out. And so, but yeah, they had UD, but UD, that was post-injury though. Like UD lost explosiveness,
I mean, 2011 healthy UD would have been such an asset to that team.
Absolutely. This is a good one. The We Need Troy Murphy days. I remember.
Oh, Jesus.
Man. Remember that?
Oh, my
refreshing.
God.
We got Bibby. We got Bibby.
That's a good way to close. All right, 5reasonsports.com.
Shout out Eddie House.
Shout out Eddie House. Check us out, if you want to. I don't know who has Dash Radio here, but if you do, we're on the Nothing But Net channel every day from 10 to 11 a.m. So we're spreading out. Also, check out our new Twitter account, which put out some pretty cool stuff today. They're forcing you to choose a team of international players for $15. It's at what is it called? I'm sorry, I always forget. Clutch NBA at 5R. And also Biscayne Bay Brewing. I'm going to get a couple myself, Alf. And thank you for joining us, Alf, for 3 minutes. Appreciate it. Upgrade to Xfinity. Maybe I can get Xfinity.
I'm moving next week. I will have Xfinity by next show.
Yeah, AT&T ain't it. All right.
Is AT&T a sponsor, real quick?
If they are, they're the best. Thanks, guys.
No, if they're not, you suck.
Did I ever tell you what I had to do? Whittingham and Cochran, when I was hosting a radio show, we had Xfinity as a sponsor for a month, and I had trashed them so much on my Twitter account that Whittingham spent God bless him, 2 hours cleaning my Twitter account, just going in there and just scraping out all of the FU Xfinity. I can't get anybody on the phone. You overcharge me. All the rest of it. If you want to sponsor, you're the best. All right, thanks for watching.
I hope Hassan Whiteside never becomes a sponsor because then I'll have to scrub my old tweets.
We're all screwed. Manny Chang, thank you for producing. As always, we appreciate it. Check out the 5 on the Floor 5 account, 5 Reasons Sports and everything.